The rivalry between Iran and Israel is a defining feature of modern Middle Eastern geopolitics. It was not always this way. Before 1979, the two nations maintained a pragmatic, even cooperative relationship. They were non-Arab powers on the periphery of an often hostile Arab world. This changed dramatically with the Iranian Revolution. The new theocratic regime, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, established an ideology that was fundamentally anti-Western and anti-Zionist. Israel, once a partner, was rebranded as the Little Satan, a proxy for the Great Satan, the United States. This ideological shift transformed a once cordial relationship into a deeply entrenched and existential conflict, setting the stage for decades of shadow wars and proxy battles across the region. This animosity is not merely rhetorical, it is a core component of Iran's foreign policy and national identity. The Islamic Republic views the existence of Israel as an illegitimate colonial enterprise and an affront to the Muslim world. This perspective drives its strategic objective to challenge and ultimately erode Israel's power and influence. For Israel, the threat is equally existential. It perceives Iran's pursuit of nuclear capabilities, its advanced ballistic missile program, and its network of regional militias as a direct and imminent danger to its national security. The conflict is therefore a zero-sum game in the eyes of both leaderships, where one side's gain is invariably seen as the other's loss, creating a cycle of escalation and confrontation. The tension has ebbed and flowed over the years, but the underlying hostility has remained constant. From the bombing of the Amia Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires in 1994, which Argentina and Israel have long attributed to Iran and Hezbollah, to the more recent direct confrontations, the conflict has grown more overt. In 2024, Iran launched unprecedented missile and drone attacks directly at Israel. This marked a significant departure from its previous reliance on proxies. Israel responded with precision strikes, demonstrating its own technological and military prowess. This direct exchange has raised the stakes, signaling that the long-running shadow war could erupt into a full-scale conventional conflict at any moment, a prospect that deeply worries the international community. As of June 2025, the situation has become even more precarious. Following a breakdown in diplomatic efforts over its nuclear program, and facing intelligence of a potential Iranian attack, Israel launched a preemptive strike. This move, made against the backdrop of an internationally unpopular and prolonged war in Gaza, has left Israel increasingly isolated. A recent United Nations vote calling for a ceasefire saw even traditional European allies distance themselves. This diplomatic isolation is a critical factor. It underscores a key vulnerability for Israel in any extended conflict: its reliance on international goodwill and support, which can quickly erode under the pressures of a long and costly war, a dynamic Iran is well positioned to exploit. Iran's strategic thinking is profoundly shaped by its experience in the Iran-Iraq War. This brutal conflict, which lasted from 1980 to 1988, was a formative event for the Islamic Republic. The nation was isolated, facing an Iraqi army heavily armed and financed by both Gulf Arab states and Western powers. Despite being outmatched in conventional military hardware, Iran endured 8 years of devastating warfare. It relied on its vast population for human wave attacks, its ideological fervor to maintain morale, and its strategic depth to absorb blows. This experience forged a national psyche centered on resilience, self-reliance, and a willingness to accept immense casualties and economic hardship to preserve the regime and its revolutionary principles. The war taught Iran's leaders invaluable lessons in asymmetric warfare and endurance. They learned how to fight and survive a prolonged war of attrition against a technologically superior adversary. This wasn't a war of swift victories, but of grinding persistence. The conflict fostered the development of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, into a formidable military and political force, adept at unconventional tactics and deeply loyal to the clerical establishment. The IRGC's doctrine, born from this crucible, emphasizes patience and the long game. It understands that wars are not always won on the battlefield in a matter of days or weeks, but can be won over months and years by outlasting the will of the enemy. This history stands in stark contrast to Israel's military experience. The Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, are structured for short, decisive campaigns. Its doctrine is built around speed, overwhelming firepower, and technological superiority to achieve clear military objectives quickly. This approach was successful in wars like the Six-Day War of 1967, However, it is less suited for protracted conflicts that become wars of attrition. A long war puts immense strain on Israel's economy, which is heavily dependent on the mobilization of its citizen reserves. Pulling tens of thousands of people from their jobs for an extended period can cripple key sectors of the economy, a vulnerability that Iran does not share to the same degree. Therefore, Iran's strategic culture is one of endurance, while Israel's is one of intensity. Iran has proven it can withstand international sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and the immense costs of a long war. The Iran-Iraq War demonstrated that its leadership is willing to sacrifice a generation to protect its revolutionary goals. This gives Tehran a significant psychological advantage in any scenario involving a protracted conflict. It knows that time is a weapon. The longer a war drags on, the more pressure builds on Israel, economically, socially, and diplomatically, while Iran, accustomed to hardship, can absorb the pressure and wait for its opponent's resolve to crack. A cornerstone of Iran's military strategy is its axis of resistance. This is a sophisticated network of state and non-state actors, militias, and political groups spread across the Middle East. It includes powerful players like Hezbollah in Lebanon, various militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, and Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Iran provides these groups with funding, training, weapons, and strategic guidance. This allows Tehran to project power and wage conflict by proxy, creating multiple fronts that can threaten Israel simultaneously. It is a strategy of strategic depth, enabling Iran to engage its adversary far from its own borders, thereby minimizing the risk to its own territory and population. This proxy network gives Iran immense flexibility and plausible deniability. When Hezbollah fires rockets into northern Israel, or the Houthis attack shipping in the Red Sea, these actions serve Iran's strategic interests without requiring the deployment of the Iranian army. This keeps the direct cost of conflict low for Tehran. It also creates a complex, multi-front challenge for Israel's military planners. The IDF cannot focus its resources on a single enemy, but must contend with threats from Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and even Yemen. As seen in the conflict since late 2023, even if Israel successfully weakens one proxy, like Hezbollah, others in the network can continue to apply pressure, sustaining a low-level but draining war of attrition. The effectiveness of this strategy lies in its ability to exhaust Israel over time. Each rocket from Lebanon or drone from Iraq forces Israel to expend costly interceptors from systems like the Iron Dome. Each skirmish on the border requires the mobilization of troops and resources. While no single proxy can defeat Israel in a conventional sense, their collective and sustained pressure is designed to bleed Israel's military, economy, and public morale. This approach turns Israel's technological superiority into a potential liability. The cost of intercepting cheap drones with multi-million-dollar missiles is an unsustainable economic equation in a long-term conflict, a reality that Iran's strategists understand and exploit fully. Furthermore, this network provides Iran with powerful allies and a buffer zone. It has cultivated deep ties with state actors like Syria under the Assad regime, giving it a crucial land bridge to Lebanon and a forward base near Israel's borders. These relationships are not merely transactional, they are built on decades of shared interests and opposition to United States and Israeli influence in the region. This intricate web of alliances ensures that Iran is not isolated. Even if it faces direct attack, its proxies can retaliate on its behalf, complicating Israel's calculations and ensuring that any war against Iran will not be a simple bilateral conflict, but a messy, region-wide conflagration that Israel is ill-prepared to sustain. In any potential long war, the calculus of international support and diplomatic endurance heavily favors Iran. Israel has historically relied on the unwavering backing of the United States, which provides crucial military aid, advanced weaponry, and a diplomatic veto at the United Nations Security Council. However, this support is not unconditional, and can become strained during prolonged conflicts that result in high civilian casualties. As the Gaza war, which has lasted over 600 days, has shown, international opinion can turn sharply against Israel. The pressure from global protests, human rights organizations, and even allied governments can create significant constraints on Israel's military freedom of action, forcing it towards ceasefires or truces it may not desire. Iran, on the other hand, operates within a different diplomatic ecosystem. It has cultivated strong strategic partnerships with global powers like Russia and China. These nations, which often see the world in terms of a great power competition with the United States, have a vested interest in preventing Iran's collapse. They provide Iran with economic lifelines, advanced military technology, and crucial diplomatic cover on the world stage. Russia and China are unlikely to stand by and allow the United States or Israel to deliver a decisive blow to their regional partner. This support provides Iran with a strategic backstop, allowing it to withstand international pressure and sanctions far more effectively than Israel can withstand the erosion of its Western support. The economic models of the two nations also point to Iran's advantage in a war of attrition. Israel's economy is a modern, integrated, and high-tech system that is highly sensitive to the disruptions of war. A prolonged conflict that requires mass reserve mobilization and disrupts trade and investment can trigger a severe economic crisis. In contrast, Iran's economy, while strained by decades of sanctions, is a resistance economy. It is structured for self-sufficiency and survival under extreme pressure. It is less dependent on global financial markets and has proven its ability to function, albeit poorly, under conditions of intense isolation. In a long war, Iran's economy is built to bend, whereas Israel's is more likely to break. Ultimately, the nature of a potential war dictates the victor. If the conflict is short, intense, and decisive, Israel's technological and military superiority gives it a clear advantage. It can inflict massive damage on Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure. However, if the conflict evolves into a protracted, multi-front war of attrition, the tables turn. Iran's strategic depth, its resilient economy, its powerful proxy network, and its backing from Russia and China give it the ability to endure. It can absorb damage and outlast Israel's will to fight. In a long game, where victory is measured not in days but in years, Iran's capacity for endurance makes it the more formidable adversary.